for those who had assumed that it might turn into a currency, terribly sorry, but this is an asset, and it's a highly speculative asset, which has conducted some funny business and some interesting and totally reprehensible money laundering activity. I think that there are criminal investigations that have taken place that I'm sure will continue to take place that demonstrate it very clearly. And there has to be regulations, and this has to be applied and agreed upon. It's a matter that needs to be agreed at a global level, because if there is an escape, that escape will be used. So I think it needs to be if anything, it shows that global cooperation, multilateral action is absolutely needed, whether it's initiated by the G7, moved into the G20, and then enlarged, but it's something that needs to be addressed. And FATF is clearly an organization that has expanded in that respect.
Cheers, freaks, and welcome to this week's Citadel Dispatch. I'm your host, Matt Odell, the show that's broadcast live weekly to you every Tuesday at 2200 UTC. You can find us on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. All the links are at citadeldispatch.com. This week, I'm joined by my friends Diverter and maxtannahill. These guys have become close friends with me. We talk about all things privacy. It's our favorite topic, so I figured who better to join me than them. At this point, I just want to say cheers to all the freaks who are joining us in the chat from all around the world. It's pretty cool to all come together every Bitcoin Tuesday. And I always like to start it out with a quick introduction from each of our guests. So Diverter, why don't you start and just introduce yourself quickly to the freaks?
Sure, man. Thanks for having me. Diverter, aka Diverter No KYC, No KYC only, however you want to put that on the end. Just interested in Bitcoin censorship resistance, what I really interested in. So whatever tool you use, be able to communicate with people without having to ask permission. That's what catches my eye. So naturally, I'm big into doing that without having to ask a whole lot of permission. I'd like to be able to talk about it without having to ask a whole lot of permission and without having to let everybody else know what I'm talking about. So fit right in this crowd. Glad to be here.
Cheers to that. What's up, Max?
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm Max Tannahill. I've been into Bitcoin, I suppose, for about kind of 5 years. I can't even remember when I first started chatting with Matt, but certainly kind of in the early days. And I think for me anyway, certainly the chat apps and the encrypted chat apps have a lot of overlap with Bitcoin. It's all data at the end of the day and all free text. So I think the kind of way we use this information and these applications should be looked at as pretty similarly to the way we use BTC. And in terms of just a bit of background about me, I've been in Singapore like over 10 years now. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from the UK. And Bitcoin is and probably always will be for me, always on the hobby side. Got no interest in working in the industry or anything. But like I'm sure a number of you here, I've got a little side gig on the side that I do to earn some bits in BTC, which is always kind of fun to do. So since doing that, it's I've certainly had a lot more kind of questions from customers, etc., on using these type of apps. As everyone is obviously increasingly more concerned about their privacy, and also I think most of all censorship resistance. for being able to kind of say what they want whenever they can.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate the in-depth intros over there. Particularly interested in talking about Singapore. I didn't know if we were going to be able to bring that up this discussion, so we will definitely get back to that. To the freaks listening on the podcast feed, to the freaks listening on all the different mediums, you can see the different ways that you can listen at citadeldispatch.com. The archives go up on Keybase and Telegram afterwards. They get syndicated out to our podcast feeds, both the TFTC Tales from the Crypt feed and the Citadel Dispatch dedicated feed. So you can check it out on all those methods. If they try and deplatform us, they're going to have to deplatform us from all of those. The current block height is 666,809. The current price is 2,731 sats. So slightly up from last week. For the freaks joining us by video on the live stream, I'm trying something new on the price display this time. On the top, we have the Evil Empire. We have Coinbase Pro, their live price sticker. And then underneath, we have the real price. We have the BISC price. And you can see just the volume differences between the Compliance Pro exchange on the top and BISC underneath. I thought it was kind of a cool discrepancy. Just a couple minutes ago, right before we started, BISC was trading at about 38,000, a little bit above it, which is just I just think that's a cool concept that people don't realize. Also, to the freaks tuning in through the podcast feed, the intro video was Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank, the ECB, just talking shit about Bitcoin. But while she did it, she mentioned something. She mentioned that they need a global response. They need a global response if they want to stop Bitcoin, because if there is an escape, she said the words escape, if there's an escape, someone will use it. And I think that doesn't only apply to Bitcoin. I think that also applies to encryption and privacy software. So I thought that's, as good a place as ever to start. To you guys, like, why is privacy so important? Why is free open source software so important? And I guess we'll start with Max this time.
I suppose for me, it's always, it comes right back to the beginning. Like, even my introduction with Bitcoin even didn't start from an Austrian perspective. It didn't even really start from a technical perspective. It was actually kind of hearing stuff about Edward Snowden and getting more involved there. And I think politically, I went from right of center to kind of far more libertarian, and then started realizing quite what the state was doing in terms of censorship, quite what it had in terms of relationships for backdoors in popular software. And, it doesn't take much to realize quite what that means for tyranny and for unchecked power. So I think it's a combination of that, plus the fact that ultimately you can't stop the signal, as they say. Really, it is just free text. It can't be stopped. I think, ultimately it's something I want to do. Really, I don't really wish upon anyone else to deal with my free speech so much. I just want to be left alone to be able to say what I want. And that's always been fundamental to how I feel. So really, politically for me, it's just, well, I want to, and I'm not going to cause anyone any harm by saying anything. The offence is taken; it's not given. And for me, it's very core, and it's something I won't settle on or deal with. I will say what I want when I want, and that's just kind of fundamental to me to do. As for the open source kind of aspect as well, it's just, I think obviously it's critical from a trust perspective. I suppose, I don't know so much for you, Matt, but you've always been pretty transparent on mistakes that you've made with Bitcoin and problems you've had. But I can honestly say this: in the last 5 years, I've been using Bitcoin. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. And when you are looking at open source software, particularly, it's a space that's incredibly a lot of threats. You probably can't think of anywhere that there aren't as many threats. So you have to think in terms of that, in that scenario. And if there is an exploit, it can be taken advantage of largely, and you will suffer for it. So for me, you know, that transparency is always important where you can possibly get it, and certainly for kind of the use with Bitcoin apps, it's often a deal breaker for me. And for a lot of the software I use for such as messengers, certainly for specific use cases, it would be a deal breaker for me as well.
I was waiting to see if Diverter was going to say something, but before I get to him, I 100% agree that in the world of Bitcoin is a world of personal responsibility. That goes, I think, hand in hand with the world of privacy. If you're trying to be privacy focused, this world defaults to custodial relationships, whether that's privacy, whether that's Bitcoin, whether that's any kind of aspect of our lives where you basically are trusting someone, relying on someone else for that responsibility. And as such, we've gotten coddled, and we're not used to a personal responsibility situation. But in a situation where we have to practice personal responsibility, we are ultimately going to make mistakes. We're going to make a lot of them. And the important thing is to stay humble and to learn from them, rather than letting them, completely take us down. But it's definitely a minefield out there for Bitcoin users. I mean,
that's just
yeah.
That's
Go
just
on.
in general, I mean, privacy in general is a minefield. Like you said, the default is none. Deal, and so often left with the illusion of a choice, where we don't actually have a choice, but they feel down all. And here you can either pick this or you can pick that, but both of them, you're screwed either way. They still leave you with this illusion of a choice, when it's two sides of the same coin. So privacy, being able to selectively reveal yourself, and you get to choose who knows what about you and who can read what you said. You get to choose who you can transact with and who you can't transact with based off of your personal moral standards. It seems we've got in this area where so many people are so convinced that they're right. I'm not smart enough to think that I am 100% right on everything and that I know best for everyone. I happen to believe everybody does to choose for themselves what's best for them and the people that are in their life. So I have no interest in forcing my beliefs and things onto where so many times we're in a situation now where that is exactly what's happening. It's all being forced upon us, and we download these apps, and there are permissions and things that people are not understanding, just clicking through because they want to use Facebook Messenger, and that they're giving away all their private data, and that it's going to be mined and sold to these companies, and they're going to start getting ads because they said something offhand in their bad life. So, privacy is of the utmost importance. And I think we're just now starting to get an idea, or people are just now getting started to get an idea of how important that is and how little we have of it.
So, I mean, I think that's very insightful there. And it's a key point that I think is important for us to hit right in the beginning. It's very interesting, this world we find ourselves in, if you are focused on privacy and sovereignty, because we have a lot of options at our disposal, and each option has different trade-offs. There's a ton of nuance here, and the funny thing is, like right now in the comments we have Pardis, BTC Pins is talking to Such Salad, and they're talking about tails versus cubes. And they're deciding like which one's better, in the comments, and everyone has an opinion on it, and there's no obvious answer in either direction because each one has different trade-off balances. But at the same time, I'm sure we have freaks listening right now who have an Amazon listening device, an Alexa, assistant sitting in their apartment right across from them right now that they can go over and unplug and make tangible privacy benefit, right? So there's this whole scale, and and to try and hit everyone at the same time is a hard task. But I think ultimately, if the path we're going down here requires personal responsibility, we need to basically teach people how to fish. You can't just tell them, eat this shit. They have to, they have to know what they're doing. They have to know what their threat model is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
go on to that.
Go ahead, Max.
I was just going to say, I think still there's, and it's always worth reiterating, there's still a bit of a confusion between privacy and anonymity. And, people do still get confused why you'd need encryption in an app. And people still get surprised why, you might be against giving your passport to a third party, especially if it's regulated, because they should be able to be trusted, that kind of attitude. Because what do you have to hide and all that. And I think making that point more, I think we do need a bit of a cultural change. I think particularly in the last 10, 15 years, with the kind of growth of platforms like Facebook and all that, we have been kind of somewhat conned culturally into being having a new normal defined then as to what's acceptable in terms of personal information that should be shared and all that. I mean, just the other day I saw a video, someone coming off Facebook, and there's like a kind of comedy video, and then they go around and physically like people's pictures in the office and hand over their passport to someone underneath a cubicle, and just kind of lurk over people's other comments and all that. And I think if you take a step back and look at kind of what Facebook is today and how that actually applies to real life, it is actually pretty weird. And actually even something like Twitter is quite weird as well. I mean, if you were to take Twitter into that and put it into real life, you're kind of like walking around looking for arguments to get yourself involved in and poke the bear in a lot of cases, or stand there in a public square shouting. That's not what people are kind of comfortable doing.
Just shouting the lowest common denominator. Completely confidently, just shouting it out, hoping people walk by and tap you on the face or something.
Just going out to strangers. Yeah, it's a nice aspect of it as well, but it's not the same kind of behavior we'd be doing in meat space necessarily, and it leads people to kind of slightly different behavior, and then them unable to then necessarily separate what they do online with what they do in meat space, but then maybe forget to not associate their real ID with it, that kind of thing. So I think things have redefined in the last few years. I think the other thing I'd just say is kind of what I leave at the point with. I mean, you've on that tweet you put a large grid with all the different messengers and all the kind of the information shared, and I think just flashed up on the screen earlier there was a comparison, right? This one as well, with all the different features. These things can be pretty intimidating for people and can look, some people won't necessarily know what all the meanings are behind everything as well. I would say that despite the need to be a cryptographic expert in some cases to verify some of this, at the end of the day, I think a lot of this can be done with just gut feeling. Asking your question, who am I actually messaging? Who's actually seeing this data? And you don't need to be technically proficient to necessarily ask those questions and have those answers.
Well, I mean, I think it's not black and white, right? I don't want people to be overwhelmed. And I say this a lot on our other show, Rabbit Hole Recap, is I don't want people to be overwhelmed. You can make incremental improvements. Like I said, if you have an Amazon Alexa, unplug the Amazon Alexa. If you're sending text messages, use an encrypted messenger. Now, is it going to be the best encrypted messenger? Maybe not, but it's a step up in the right direction, and then you can improve from there. One of the things I like about this show is I think not enough people focus on actionable discussion, things that the freaks can actually use and tangibly hold. There's a lot of philosophical filler out there, and I just really want to dig right in. Cool. So, I mean, the three of us were chilling. I mean, you're in Singapore, Max, so it's your morning, but it's like happy hour. We're meeting up with the boys. We mentioned Signal had their best week ever in the history of Signal. They went from like 10 million users to like 50 million users because of WhatsApp's privacy policy change. And it's pretty funny, like these things, like, did anyone really think Facebook took privacy seriously? No, but like one day, like you have a mass movement happen because of some privacy policy change, and I think as privacy advocates, it's important that we just take advantage of every mass movement we have. This is how people learn. They get burned, they wake up, and then they go seek out knowledge. They go seek out improvement. So with that said, diverter, is Signal secure? Should people be using it?
Yes. Yes, Signal should be used. Now, is Signal secure? I mean, look, we can break down all types of what metadata leaks and all that stuff. At the end of the day, is Signal more secure messenger than SMS? Yes, hands down. Objection, just yes, period. So a lot of this, which I'm learning a lot as I go along too, is more regional than what I thought. So SMS, for example, that's basically that's your standard communication in the United States. Everything, all my text, I text SMS. So replace your default SMS messenger on your phone with a single click. I mean, that's leaps and bounds ahead of everything. As I've said before, it doesn't really how secure your messenger is if nobody else that you talk to uses it. Who cares? So, like you said, you've got the WhatsApp policy change, and then you get an Elon Musk tweet, people to use Signal, and boom, people sign up. Meanwhile, people that have been over here screaming in the corner to use Signal for 3 years, nobody's listening, and then one Elon tweet sends them. But exactly what you said, you got to take times right now when people are starting to look up and say, well, wait, Facebook is collecting way too much. Why am I giving them all this stuff? And they see a celebrity tweet it out, they join on, they realize it's really easy. When I load in, I pop in, and it gives me a little pop-up message. It says, do you want to replace your default SMS? Yes, I do. Boom. Now you're using an encrypted messenger with your mom, your dad, your daughter, your son, your cousin, whoever, not just your Bitcoin bros. That's the big difference to me, and why I really like Signal a lot.
So let's unpack this a little bit. I mean, first of all, one thing you mentioned, which I think is a massive improvement with Signal, is if you're an Android user, you can set it as your default text message client. So non-Americans might not be as aware of this as Americans, but as Diverter said, in America, we have a problem. We use SMS still. I don't. In most places of the world, they don't. SMS is basically a postcard. When you send it, every third party in the middle of that transaction, of that message getting sent, is seeing it. They see it completely. On iPhone, American iPhone users, their iMessage defaults to encryption, and we can get into the nuances there. There's plenty of trade-offs with iMessage, and we will get into the nuances. But for Android users, they don't have something like that. And now Signal comes along, they can use it as their default messaging app. iPhone users still are using it as a separate messaging app, but together they can communicate. One thing I want to unpack there is Elon's tweet kind of sent the ball rolling, right? And we were talking about earlier, like explaining trade-offs to users and making them trying to help them understand why they need this and where their perspective should be. There's still a benefit there, right? From Elon just saying use Signal, just like eat this fish, Like I think we need that too, right? Am I wrong here?
No, 100%. Who expects Elon? Elon's not going to get on Twitter and say, here's the reasons you should use it. He's gonna pop in and say, hey, like you said, eat this fish, man. It's good. And he's going on about his business. Now, the rest of us are Elon's mess. Hey, everybody's got a role to play. My role to play is I'm not Elon. I can't just hop on. I don't have that type of influence. So I can't hop on and say, hey, man, I should be using Jamie or Briar or whatever obscure. But what I can do is kind of hang around. I can hang around in the comments. I can hang around on Telegram, and Keybit pops in and says, hey, I saw that Elon Musk Signal. Why? Boom. Now, here's your end. So yes, I 100% agree. Take advantage of all those.
Max, Hit us with your opinion.
So, I completely agree with diverter. I've got just 6 reservations with Signal. So, first off, though, I say yes, it's secure, and definitely yes, it's an improvement over not only people using SMS, but also I think it's a huge improvement over people using WhatsApp or iMessage, just because of the variety of issues there. But a few things to kind of just point out. So one, when people talk about Signal, they typically think of the phone app, and I think that is very secure, and I think it sits in a good place at the OS level typically, and that makes it secure. I don't have the same kind of faith in the desktop app, and I believe there definitely being historical security issues with the desktop app, with kind of exploits with extracting text out of the desktop app when it was paired to the mobile. So I think you kind of increase your risk somewhat by taking the convenience there. My other kind of issue a bit with Signal is the fact that it's SMS based. So I think that that gives you a couple of challenges there. One is the identity aspect. Just the fact that you very much typically trust, just for the general user, you trust someone that you already have their number stored with. And as we know with SIM hijacking, but also just the fact that, maybe someone that you haven't spoken to for a while has let their number expire. And certainly in Asia, in Singapore, the phone numbers get recycled pretty quickly. So it's not unusual for me to look through my address book of contacts that I never delete and see some pretty startling profile pic changes. But often for most people, they wouldn't necessarily notice that a contact had changed, even with warnings over key pairs changing and all that. They wouldn't necessarily understand the cryptographics behind that, and just the very fact that it's based on SMS identity is an issue. So I think that's kind of one other issue, and that's not to say that it's a bad thing. It's just it's a trade-off. The other thing is the fact that the 2FA, I don't think many people know to set it, and I'm not talking about necessarily the PIN that you do to get in, but just the fact that if someone does have your number, being able to ensure that anyone that does SIM jack you, that they don't actually take the whole account away from you. And then lastly, and this is particularly for Android users, yes, the phone app is secure, and I think I actually saw this in the comments on Twitter as well. But I have huge concerns with the keyboards on Android, particularly Google keyboard. And I've had very kind of, what we consider normies, people that are interested in privacy and security to the same level, complain to me directly, how come I get adverts on something I chatted with someone over a secure messenger? And how is someone able to get relevant ads? And the only thing I can possibly think of is that one of the parties are using an Android keyboard, and that information is going back to Google servers. So before you even get the information encrypted, before it actually travels through the app, you're already giving everything out in clear text, assigned to probably an IP address and a MAC address, and baked into your digital profile. So that, along with your general endpoint security, means that yes, Signal is secure, but you need to think about what OS you're using it on, what kind of device you're using it on, and obviously who you're communicating with, both for verifying and for their own technical hygiene practices.
I just wanted to say, this is why I have friends on this show, because I like to fuck with you guys. Obviously, asking the question, is Signal secure, was meant to be provocative, because that question lacks all nuance whatsoever, and can't actually have an absolute answer. All these things do have trade-offs. The phone number question is a very interesting one. I think that comes from America, just the fact that we're so used to. You're Singapore, you're an expat from Britain, you're used to using phone numbers as an identifier too. It plugs into that network effect, that network graph that already exists with WhatsApp and SMS and iMessage. But obviously it has major issues in terms of privacy. You mentioned that your phone book never changes, that you keep that database. That means that not only are you trusting every single corporation that has interacted with your phone number, you're also trusting your friends that you've ever met and gave them your phone number that they haven't leaked it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, just to dive in, like a few years ago, I remember, and I don't, I've never seen it talked about since, but there was an app that you could download, and it would essentially import your entire contact list. And the idea was that it was a smart app for people that couldn't manage their contacts. So it would essentially grab all your contact list, cross-reference with everyone else's contact list that they were grabbing, and then provide you like with a suggested contact name. So the idea was is to provide people that were absolute disasters with personal management of contacts an idea who was calling them, and people were signing up with these apps. I think they possibly did get banned from the various app stores or whatever, but they hoovered up all sorts of contact data. So of course, like when you give out your phone number to your friends, which is a completely natural thing to do, the metadata is a complete bitch. You're going to get that. You're going to get your mates give you away your phone number to all sorts of other apps and things. I mean, we know that with Telegram, that it grabs all your your contacts and shares them amongst everyone. So it's a real problem, the phone number identity, because we don't have a decentralized identity and nothing that's aside from really email, I suppose, that pretty much everyone you can guarantee has.
And so on top of that, so basically what we have is we have a convenience versus security and privacy trade-off. And we're always going to be up against that trade-off, right? And Signal tries to deal with it in their own way. They try and make it as approachable as possible while not compromising on privacy, but ultimately they do have to compromise on privacy elements there. One element is that phone number, which, by the way, they say they do not store. They only are sent a hash of your number. That we can verify that they only send a hash of the number because it's open source software. This is why open source is important. When people say things are done locally, you need to be able to verify that they're done locally. When Apple says iMessage encrypts locally and they don't have a key, there's no way for us to verify that. There's some nuance here that if you download it through one of the app stores, there's no way to verify the signal that you downloaded is the same as the code that you can build yourself. Yeah. But if you run Android, technically you can. But see, there's all these different levels of nuance here. One thing you mentioned was, I guess you called it two-factor. I think they call it SIM lock, where like you lock it to your phone number. If someone ports your phone number, which Bitcoiners know very well, these SIM jackings where they take your phone number, they can obviously then start communicating with your Signal contacts without you knowing and without the Signal contact realizing. Now, Signal has two protections in place there. That attacker does not actually get your messages, which is a big win. They don't get historical messages. And everyone you communicated with gets a little message that says your key pair changed. That's where we get to the issue, right? Where eat this fish doesn't work. Right? The user needs to know what that means when they see the key pair change. Most users see that, and the last thing they're thinking is, okay, my friend just got hacked, and now I'm talking to a hacker, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, actually, I guess I sent out a toot the other day because I was on a Bitcoin enemy. But just a couple little things, because we got a lot of new Signal users coming in. So a couple of things that I think people should be aware of. Max brought up an excellent one about the keyboard and the actual OS that you're running on. That's one of the things go in and do in Signal is you can request an incognito keyboard. So you can request that your keyboard not log this stuff. Now, does that mean that your keyboard is not going to be logged in anymore? Not necessarily. No, do not rely on that. I would much rather see people switch from using like a Gboard or a Google board or whatever to something like, an open board or AnySoft. Something I've gotten quite fond of. Max actually introduced me to TeslaCube, which has OpenPGP integrated. But things that's a big deal. It shouldn't be overlooked. The registration lock for your number, it definitely shouldn't be overlooked. My personal opinion, I think that should be on by default, which is where I kind of run with a few of these apps is what can you default away from the user, and what can't you do, based on security and convenience trade-offs. It's such a
So what do you want by default? I mean, this is where most people get into arguments with Signal, is like where they've decided on the default. So you're saying that they should default to that incognito keyboard mode at least, right?
The incognito mode, the registration, I would love to see both of those default on. And I would love information fed to the user PIN, not just putting on, what is it, 6 to 8 digit PIN number, that you actually can, a good strong alphanumeric PIN right there, 25, 30 random characters, that you can use a really good strong PIN number. That way, if somebody does port your phone number and try to go over, and you have registration lock on, and they're asked for this PIN, that it's not just, a matter of the brute force. So, I would like to see a little bit more of the defaults on, but I feel like they're pretty close right now to where they need to be.
So just to be clear here, your audio broke up a little bit. Were you saying TesterCube? I've used TesterCube before, which is mobile PGP. TesterCube has a keyboard as well that has the PGP built into the keyboard.
Yeah, it does.
Well, yeah. That's dope.
Yeah. And it makes it really easy to use PGP. It really does. Max has actually introduced me to it.
Yeah, CoinShares introduced me to TesterCube. TesterCube is one of the easiest ways to use PGP. I didn't know about the keyboard. Just to be clear, all these freaks that are using Tim Apple's products, in Android land, we can change our keyboard.
Actually, you can do iOS as well.
Oh, you can now?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so I have tested both iOS and Android, and it works very well.
Baller. So just keep in mind, though, that once again, it's the convenience versus security and privacy trade-off. These keyboards suck in comparison to the corporate surveillance ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so just to build on Diverter's point, so I kind of got a couple of points to say on the whole kind of privacy defaults. Number one is probably this is why Diverter's not running a multinational company and making millions. Because he's not thinking of stuff for the customer, the end customer, so that's part of it. And I think the other thing is, we can be a bit paranoid now, but I think there is reason to believe that the big tech companies, especially people behind tech messengers, I think you'd be foolish to think that this doesn't happen, is that they don't get friendly visits from law enforcement. And I don't mean anything aggressive or horrendous threats or anything like that, but I think there are nudges, and I think that certainly happened with Apple and their iCloud backups. I think there are obviously usability challenges as well, but I think that if you are a centralized entity and you are managing like a messenger application and you are in a certain jurisdiction, there is a good chance that you get suggestions and you get pushed in a certain direction by those folk to maybe not include certain features or not include certain defaults to make law enforcement's job easier.
03 January 09 asked if the graphene default keyboard is solid. Yeah, the graphene default keyboard is any soft keyboard. Obviously, if you... What was that?
I thought it was another one. I thought you had to install AnySoft separately. I thought graphene came with its own keyboard.
Oh, maybe. Whatever. The graphene keyboard is a solid keyboard.
For sure.
In terms of private, it's an open source keyboard. Maybe I'm incorrect on the one you chose. But obviously, this is where we get back into we have the freaks that have Alexa, and then we have the freaks that are asking me questions like that. Yes, your best option is obviously to run a graphene or a Copperhead phone. Those go insane with the defaults. All their defaults are, privacy first, UX second. And they do a decent balance with that trade-off. I think it's a fairly reasonable trade-off for the average person to make. You're not giving up that much. Obviously, you're giving up Google services because that's the whole point. But short of that, it's not like you have an unusable phone. Most apps that you get used to still work, and obviously you have a fully functioning Chromium browser there, where you can use like pretty much any web app, and all these services have web apps. Like if you're still attached to Twitter and you want to use Twitter, for instance, you just use the web app; it works.
Absolutely.
And the freaks probably know, but I have a guide for graphene on tftc.tv on our YouTube channel. I also have it on my Keybase page, hosted on Keybase. So I want to let's jump into iMessage, since I think you brought it up, with them getting pressured on the cloud backups. I mean, I think an important thing people say to me, shout out to Elmo. People say to me that, why are you so hard on these companies and Bitcoin about going against KYC? Why are you so hard on companies like Apple eroding our privacy? Companies like Google eroding our privacy? And I'm realistic. Like, I know that regulations are forcing them to. I know that we have, the Snowden releases showed us that companies are being forced to do things behind closed doors that we're not even made aware of.
Yeah.
But that's fine, and they're gonna do them, and it's important for us to do us and assume the correct assumptions. And the assumption should be that all of these guys are getting pressured, and that all of these guys are going to bend the knee, and you have to work out from there. If they don't bend the knee, if they don't compromise you, and they don't go behind your back, then consider that a win. But you have to assume that they're going to. So what is our concern here with iMessage? Max, you mentioned it first. Why don't you just dive right in here?
So I think iMessage is probably all right, actually, compared to the rest of the iCloud ecosystem. So I actually, to be honest, I try and avoid it, despite having used iOS before going Android for about 10 years. And I used Mac OS as my personal computer mostly. So I'm kind of quite well baked into the system, but I actually just avoid it mostly because I don't like the closed garden aspect. So there's only literally like one person I regularly contact on iMessage. But I think, so from my understanding, and again, I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that there's a private key created and stored on the device keychain. I actually can't remember now kind of quite what the issue is, but the reality is like, I've actually got so little interest in even looking at what the security model is behind iMessage, because one, everything's so baked into iCloud. Two, it's all closed source anyway. And three, you're all on a closed source operating system and heavily account based. So even if there were a bunch of assurances, is that the messages could only be decrypted locally, I wouldn't trust it. And I think kind of we know for sure, like there was I think it was probably a couple of years ago now, but there was a terrorist incident for the first time that Apple really got into a bit of a showdown with the FBI. We know now that almost immediately the Apple was subpoenaed, and I think the feds pretty much had everything they wanted from the last iCloud backup that went to the phone.
They still went for the precedent. They still went for it was the San Bernardino.
Yeah, they still want
in America.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, you could also, again, you can be a bit paranoid, but were they using that to pretend they were going for the precedent and making, if you're negotiating with someone, right, you would ask for more than you can get. And then if you were to walk back, you could then look as reasonable. And maybe all that was a show to kind of hide quite how much they were going for, what they can get at the cloud level. And, I think it's disappointing how much people, especially in the InfoSec and the cryptography space, have really heavily shielded messengers that are, and companies like Google and Apple, because they're reputable and have got decent graphic security. But the defaults have really put you in danger there.
The two main issues with both WhatsApp and iMessage is that they're closed source, so we can't verify.
Yeah.
We can't verify what's happening there, and they both default to cloud backups that are unencrypted, and there's no reasonable reason to do that. Apple will say to you that the reason they do it is because they don't want people to lose their messages if they inevitably lose their password, because people do lose their passwords. But I mean, it's just their messages. Like, I don't think Like I you should at least, give you, it's a bullshit reason. The real reason is they want a backdoor. They want an easily accessible backdoor. It's almost even easier than having the phone backdoored because it's even the data is sitting on their servers. So you can destroy your phone and they still have all the data ready for a subpoena to hand that over. And it's the same deal with WhatsApp. And then iMessage has one other issue is that the type of encryption they use is like bare minimum. And there's been some questions of why they don't use a more hardened algo there. But I mean, I think that's probably neither here nor there. I don't think they're trying to undermine the algo when they just have everything in plain text sitting on their cloud servers by default.
Agreed. One thing I would say though on the it's just their messages. I think you still need to factor in what regular people do with their messages, and there are people there's a lot of users that get pretty sentimental about their messages. And when you're looking at something like iCloud, or for that reason, any other cloud storage system, like a kind of the Google Suite, is that people are completely giving themselves over to those corporations. So they're storing, they'll have a new baby, and then that first couple of years where they're non-stop taking pictures will all be sitting on servers. And these people would be absolutely devastated if they lose their single device and then can't get access to those messages and all that. So
they'd rather a random ass Chinese company log their child's face into their base analysis software than potentially lose the photo.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Diverter, I feel you fuming over there. You got anything to add for us?
No. Hey, especially on the iMessage, I default to Max to all iOS questions and services, Android ads. So yeah, no, I'll just sit back and listen. One thing I will say, I wanted on the actual subpoenas and stuff. That's one thing about Signal. What we have seen on Signal, when they talk about what they keep, what they don't keep, what they're allowed, what they turn over, and what they're not. One of the good things about Signal is we actually have evidence of that. I mean, it happened. Granted, it was a few years back. You can see this on their sites, a couple other places, but they were subpoenaed for information for 2 phone numbers. One of the phone numbers was a Signal phone number. The other one wasn't. Obviously, they couldn't really give a Signal number. The one that was, what they handed over was the date that the account was created and the last time that account had hooked up to the Signal servers, and that was it. So we can see that when they're asked to turn over what they that's when your question comes. What do they harvest from you by default? And I know you shared the screenshot I think earlier or in the tweet about Apple, where they are now giving you all the data that's linked to you on the different messengers and the different apps, and it basically shows nothing for Signal. Obviously, there's a tie to it, so we can talk about misleading that may be. But the main, if they're not storing any information about you, everything they've got, they just don't have it.
Well, so I have the doc shown about what's linked to you on the screen right now. I don't know if you can see because you're coming in through mobile. Just for the freaks out there, that's how dedicated Diverter is. He's coming in through mobile. I think a key thing to what was that?
No, I just said busy week. Been a busy week.
Busy week. Always hustling. I love it. So I think a key thing to keep in mind here, let's unpack it. We'll double unpack it. Is first of all, Signal technically isn't storing your phone number. They're storing a one-way hash of your phone number. And what a hash function does is basically if you provide a piece of data, in this case, your phone number, the hash will always be the same. But if you have the hash, you can't reverse engineer it to find the phone number. Now with phone numbers, it's a little bit different because phone numbers are like publicly accessible information. So if you have someone's phone number, you could put it in, find the hash, and know if it's a Signal user. And that's, that information they knew that it was a registered Signal user. But technically on their servers, there's no, your phone number there and your name, which is why they're saying data not linked to you. Once again, everything Tons of nuance. Yes, this is the situation we want to be in, though, is we want all these companies' defaults to be not collecting personal data. Are we trusting them? Sure. If it's open source, we can verify, but most people aren't going to be going through verifiable means, even if it's open source. So we do have to trust the companies, but at least the companies should be outwardly saying their default is to collect as little information as possible and don't have that information to pass on. Now, we're fortunately in a situation where the most powerful country on earth, at least to right now, still, America, is fine with that. They are not making that illegal. They're not making that illegal. They're not saying that Signal has to collect, some kind of identifiable KYC information. They could, right? And this is this interesting balance we find ourselves in, where maybe Signal's good enough, right? But if the powers that be want to squash it, they could squash it very, very easily.
Oh yeah, 100%, sure. And Ragnar made a comment the other day, about basically if you're not your own ISP, and all the infrastructure top to bottom is not your own without anybody else that can lean on you, then they have the ability to come in and apply so much pressure that even if you don't want to bend the knee, it's either fold it all in or do what they ask. So yes, Signal is it's a centralized company. U.S. government could come in, lean heavily on, and there would be. As of right, can we rely on that forever? No. There are some P2P type apps.
Well, we might be able to. That's my point. Then, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like we may be able to, if we have powerful governments allow us, give us, don't actively fight centralized, privacy focused Signal's an interesting one, right? Because it's not even a corporation. It's backed by a 501c3 that their biggest competitor, WhatsApp, the founder donated a bunch of money to seed them. I think he donated, it was like over $100 million he donated to them. So I think it's a very interesting model for a centralized privacy focused initiative in a world that's not completely adversarial, right? Like a lot of the things we talk about in Bitcoin land is completely adversarial. Like we have to worry about all the way to the nth degree, because if they compromise the money at any point, all money is compromised. It's a massive incentive. But with private messaging, there's a middle ground, right? Like you don't necessarily need to go like full cypherpunk. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot kind of what happens over the next few years. I suppose I don't see any difference yet with the US government's wish to do mass surveillance. I don't think that's changed from the days of Snowden. If anything, I think since his revelations, I think it's actually pushed probably that more into the shadows. At that level. So I think there's still a wish for that to do it. It's horrible to say, but I think we haven't yet reached the point where there's enough of a blowback from that power to cause the pendulum to swing the other way yet. So I think we're probably looking at an increasing encroachment of free speech probably over the next few years. In multiple jurisdictions in the West, not just the US, but in the EU, UK, and we're obviously seeing Australia put some pretty tough encryption laws in place, and the UK's got key disclosure laws. And I think even if they're not constitutional yet in the US, I think there's enough to believe. There's already enough that you can see where people are working around law enforcement are working around the letter of the law and going for other ways to manage that, such as civil forfeiture, that kind of stuff, to apply pressure in other ways. So I still think, I think for the time being, you've got to think adversarially in a way, because the general direction is worse if you're looking for more privacy and sovereignty.
Well, I mean, I think you always think adversarially, like you expect the worst, but you hope for the best, And I think there's something to be said about us using all the tools at our disposal when they're at our disposal. so we don't have to go like all the way extreme down the, the censorship resistant trade-off scale until it's absolutely necessary. Like, we can be prepared for it. But maybe it's not needed. I mean, to compare your home country, Great Britain, versus my home country, the U.S., I mean, we're still, I talk shit about the Constitution all the time because I just don't think it offers the kind of protections people think it offers. But still, to this day, like, we don't have to disclose our passwords for encrypted drives. We're protected. We still have basic free speech, solid free speech protections compared to the rest of the world. And organizations like Signal can take advantage of that to say all this data is encrypted. We don't know what our users are doing, and that's constitutionally protected. And if that's the case, if those tools are available to us, we'd be idiots not to use them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the tool is kind of a bit of it's kind of what I do. I'm far from a security expert, a privacy expert, cryptographic expert, any of that. I surround myself with people that I feel like are me. I soak up their knowledge and then I pass it off as my own. Pro tip there. So, but what I do is I get my hands dirty. I try stuff like the other day. You've been using it for a while, Matt. I hopped on Threema. Now the Threema came out as released everything open source app clients to where the code can be reviewed. They've had a good couple security audits recent. So I wanted to hop on there and see what that's like. Is this something that strikes that right balance between privacy, convenience? Sometimes something warrants you going ahead and encrypting locally, using your own local PGP encryption before you send it, regardless of what. So, like you said, there's so much nuance and balance and trade-off to this whole thing. I mean, bingo boards are lighting up everywhere right now. Unpack in tweet or in a single blog post or any of that. I really highly advise everyone to use these things. Get your hands on them. Use them. See what they feel like. See the difference and understand what those different trade-offs mean, so that you can then explain that to the people that you communicate with. That's the way we spread this stuff.
So I agree. Let's dive into this then. So I mean, we were in a group chat on Keybase. So twofold. First of all, he mentioned Threema. We've been talking about Signal. Both allow them to view your key in app with a scannable QR code. And the idea there is the app has already told you that you have a secure connection, whether that's Signal or Threema. If you scan the QR code through another means, it's important that it's through another means, not through the same app. Then you have a second confirmation that the key wasn't changed in between your transfer, right? That transfer of the original key is super important. So you're supposed to verify that. Almost in practice, nobody does. But if you're breaking your lockdown or you live in a sane place that doesn't have a lockdown, verify with your friends that the key is the same. If the key changes, verify again. If you don't have the liberty of seeing them in person, I don't even know what you guys look like. I only know you through online. Confirm through a second messenger at least. Obviously, like we can go in depth on PGP here, and we probably will, but that's another nuanced thing. These are little things you can verify, important to do. Now to go back, you mentioned, like we were talking about Threema. I think this is like a funny little story because I think it's like perfectly encapsulates how you have to look at privacy. Unfortunately, it's just the reality. and we met, the three of us met on Twitter. We had started conversations on Telegram, and then we moved to Keybase to be more, more secure. We thought it was a more secure trade-off balance. Keybase recently changed their terms of service, and then we had a whole group discussion in Keybase about moving to Threema, right? And it's just a constant process of just figuring out the trade-offs and assessing the trade-offs, assessing the current situation that we find ourselves in, and proceeding forward based on that analysis, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things is like it's worth playing around, obviously, and trying it. But I think if you're going to be jumping around messengers, start doing that with your friends that are more willing to jump around messengers, so you don't piss off all your other mates when you do that. A few things I've noticed. I mean, I'm yet to see kind of what Threema's like in a large group chat and how it works there. One of the things I've actually noticed already is using Signal for large group chats really sucks. It's not good. And it's just small things like not being able to delete media en masse. So if your phone's kind of running out of space because you're in a large group with people chucking video and pictures in, you actually can't clean through the app easily, unless I've missed a setting, but I don't think so. Whereas WhatsApp, it has kind of better storage management options, and obviously Telegram keeps stuff in a cache. So I think a big part of it is actually choosing the right messenger for the job before you kind of you jump and make the kind of the attempt to shift your network with it.
You fucking mentioned it. I have a love-hate relationship with them. Let's unpack Telegram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Well, I'll just say I think Ergo had the most succinct point, which is that Telegram is social media. It's not, and that's where you should start from it as a look there. And then
competes with Twitter then more than Signal?
I think so. Although having said that, I have had people that are pretty comfortable doing certain things on the secret message request, and it works pretty well for that. I think the cool thing though is that what I like about Telegram, I'll start with what I like, is that I still think there's a place for publicly endorsing companies that at least outwardly show a strength against coercion, whether it be from corporations or governments or anything like that. And I think that, sure, we all know that Durov could really disappoint us, and we could find that the MT proto algo has been broken for years and the encryption is compromised. All that could be done, but at the same time, I think I think it's a positive move anyway to move away from platforms like Twitter, where there's uneven, I don't like using the term censorship, but uneven moderation that you disagree with, for example. Whereas Twitter, I think, is far more liberal in that, and I think it's far more fair in what they allow on the platform. And actually, like kind of, like you would in the market, avoiding one shop and going to the other. I don't think we should eschew centralized solutions entirely, and they're great for putting people into the funnel and getting them used to it. I mean, just bringing friends into a Telegram group from WhatsApp and then being able to search for GIFs that were previously banned on WhatsApp and you couldn't find is actually enough of a red pill for some people to get started. That's actually important for them to know that there's actually still an internet out there where they can search for something that might not be, endorsed by some, woke SJW type or some other heavily conservative person that doesn't want to see pornography or anything else. So I think if you approach it like social media and you're aware of the trends, I think Telegram's a great messenger, and I think it's fantastic from a user privacy perspective in terms of the policies they have. Obviously, it's not as locked down as secure private messages like Threema and Signal, but it's certainly a big improvement over the kind of the Google, Apple, Facebook, aspect of companies where so much of that information is being shared, and I don't think it has the same degree of lockdown there.
Diverter, why do you love Telegram? Why do you hate Telegram?
FA stickers, no end-to-end encryption. I'm with Max 100% on the looking at Telegram as more of a social media than a secure messenger. But having said that, I'm a US based customer. So, again, this is where the SMS stuff comes in. So if I wasn't used to communicating with SMS, maybe that would be different. Maybe I would view it differently. As it stands right now, Signal to me is basically like having a Telegram secret chat on all the time. Telegram, I can go in, I can relax and hang out in groups with my friends. We can chat, we can do whatever, and it works great. It's seamless. Great stickers, like I said. That's one of the bonuses I loved about Signal, was being able to move my Telegram stickers to Signal. So that's a big deal for me, when you're dealing with social media apps. Biggest difference. But it really, what's that?
Look, Telegram is fucking awesome. The tool set that they provide you, the features they provide you for free, are fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
They have no business model whatsoever. They don't serve you ads. Pavel Durov, the founder, says he doesn't scrape all of our information for ads and stuff. And they provide you up to 2 gigs of files you can send. People host whole movies on Telegram. But some things are too good to be true. And I question myself every day. I wonder, this guy is either a based fucking billionaire, the Zuckerberg of Russia, who created Russian Facebook and then got kicked out of Russia, had to sell and left Russia. So he's either a based billionaire or he's in the pocket of one of the intelligence operations, because it's like, how is he just spending all this money hosting all my shit for me? With no business model whatsoever. And I know now he's launching a business model, but it's just a really interesting thing, a really interesting concept. And at the same time, he's got, his apps. He has a free open source version of Telegram, the client. There are some questions with their encryption algorithm they chose, but they could have been just cocky about it. Why break the encryption? Why give weak encryption when the overwhelming majority of chats that are happening are just sitting, not end-to-end encrypted on your service. And then the last thing is, we saw them recently start censoring channels, and the issue is the same issue that we keep seeing. Is if these corporations know what their users are doing, they have the data to censor, they're going to be compelled to censor based off of that data. And they're going to be rejected from app stores. And maybe Telegram's a little bit more resistant than other apps because they do have, open source versions of their apps. You can get a direct download APK. You can get it from F-Droid. They have a web app version. But ultimately, he needs to comply with anything Apple or Google tells him to do. Otherwise, he's going to get removed from the app stores. So we're starting to see this censorship roll in. And that brings me to our other killed darling, with our love-hate relationship, which is Keybase. And Keybase has historically been very good about not censoring user content. They have more sane defaults than Telegram. It is end-to-end encrypted by default. I think it's important for users to realize that these large group chats, it doesn't really matter if it's end-to-end encrypted, because any person in that chat could be a mole. You have 200 people in the chat, one of them's a fucking mole. And he's logging all the information. So let's jump into Keybase. Max, Keybase. Well, let's start with Diverter this time. Diverter, Keybase. Why do you love it? Why do you hate it?
I love Keybase for the Keybase system, the public folders. Really good feature, underutilized, I feel like. Used that for a long time. What I don't like is the recent change to their terms of service, where are very open to hosting like dispense guys, the 3D gun printing crowd, quite a large group on there. And now those terms of service have changed to explicitly ban that, which that's really, I really have a problem when we get into stuff like that. I don't necessarily mind so much if it's illegal in your country. What I'm going to say, advocating for criminals to be able to break the law without getting caught. That's not what privacy is about. So if it's illegal in your country, what are you going to do? But for something that's not illegal, that's more of bending the knee to this, this woke movement or whatever you want to call it, I start to have a problem with it. What really put it over the edge for me is some of the very vague wording that they began using on that terms of service, which is similar to the way Twitter goes, which is basically blah, 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 and anything otherwise objectionable. Now, you find the thing that can't fit in there, and then we'll talk. You know, I can't be censored then. So that's where I really ran into a problem.
Just to add fuel to the fire here, Diverter is one of the admins with me of the largest Bitcoin Keybase group. So his anger towards Keybase
and it was
is coming from is coming from a user that has used it significantly. I think there's two elements here that people should keep in mind with Keybase. It's both a messaging app. I guess it's threefold. It's a messaging app. It's an identity layer that ties into PGP and your social accounts, and it's also a file storage service where they provide free file storage. And they were recently bought by Zoom, which does not have a very good privacy track record. So I could 100%, you know, like, let's be honest here. When you're hosting other people's files, you have massive liability. Public files. If those are 3D printed gun files, you know, I 100% support the movement, but they have massive liability there. That is different than them going after encrypted chats that they might not know the actual what's being discussed in the chat. And this goes back to our previous conversation of when these companies know what's going on, that they can be compelled to censor based on the information they know that's going on. So there's a portion of Keybase's offering where they know what's going on, which is those publicly hosted files, which are known publicly. Anyone downloading them knows what those files are. And then they have these private chats, and their software is supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. It's free open source software, so you can technically verify that it is encrypted locally. Both with Signal and Keybase, their server is not open source, but because their client is open source and you know that it's encrypted locally, it doesn't matter. You don't have to trust the server with the actual privacy of the contents of the information. So I mean, it should be interesting to see how that plays out. They have not I don't believe they've actually censored people based off of it. I think with the Biden administration, we're about to see a massive deplatforming of the 3D gun printing crowd, and it'll probably be the biggest free speech fight since porn in the United States, and it should be really interesting to watch how that unfolds. I kind of wanted to unpack here. I just wanted to sit here for a moment and dive in on the terms of service thing. Like, are we, and this has come up before, specifically in Bitcoin and Wasabi's terms of service. There's an argument to be made that as privacy focused users, we should look the other way if someone's terms of service maybe is not as ideal as we want it to be, but they haven't acted on it and they're kind of just legally covering their ass. Is there any nuance there with you guys? Is there any wiggle room that's like, you know, Keybase says, you know, you can't do anything illegal on our platform, but they don't actually come out swinging? Like, is that acceptable, or do we just move no matter what?
All right, I'll answer this. A couple points. So I don't want to dive into it too much, but just on the Keybase stuff as well. To be honest, I'd already stopped really using it to the same extent, just because I felt that since the Zoom takeover, the product hadn't really been developed. Quite honestly, I'm actually surprised that both you, Matt, and Diverter are actually still continuing on that Bitcoin group on Keybase, because for me, like, I don't know, just the chat features on end-to-end encrypted group chats just kind of, for me, just suck a bit. Like, I find the client slow, they're a bit bloaty, doesn't work particularly well on my Android with like no notifications because I'm using AOSP. And even on like iPhone and Mac OS, it's not great. So to be honest, the UX for me is still a big thing. So
well, if I can just jump in there real quick, the two big UX things I like about Keybase, three big UX things I like about our Keybase group or Bitcoin Keybase group is it's very difficult for impersonators to impersonate you. Because of their follow mechanism and the way they link into other social media handles. And that's a major issue for more public Bitcoiners on Telegram and Twitter, where I just have people impersonating me all the time. So it's more difficult for them to do that on Keybase as a platform. I like that I can, in our super group, we can have channels. I know Diverter was like training people on PGP in one of the channels. It's really hard to do that in these Telegram groups. When they get larger, they get kind of unruly. And then the third thing is I like the auto delete. Like I know it's like kind of just a comfort blanket. It's just it's something that if the actual platform is compromised, they're logging all the information anyway. If there's a mole on the group chat, he's logging all the information anyway. But it's just nice to know that every message is just getting deleted from everyone's phones every 90 days.
Yeah, I mean, I started getting really excited. Like when they first came out, I remember, there being a lot of talk on the decentralized identity, and I love the fact that you kind of, the whole signing in mechanism works really well. But at the same time, I never thought they communicated particularly well in app how you should follow people. So what I was finding is it was almost like Twitter, where people were like, just random people were following you, and people didn't really know to check stuff. And I had people kind of setting up failed proofs and then messaging me. So, even like Keybase, who I think have probably done it the best, I still found the whole impersonation thing. Okay, there wasn't as widespread impersonation going on, but I still found it pretty awkward to get kind of, the trust working and for people to know how to do the signing as well. And I think it's partly because ultimately, like since they've been bought out, especially now, I don't think they were developing it much further.
They're doing nothing.
No, and I think for me, I already thought, well, if they're not going to develop the platform, I'm not really going to spend any more time on it. And I'd rather, work on communities than on a platform where you can, there's actually a bit of a product roadmap and stuff's going to come out.
That's when you've hit the sad portion of the lifespan of a product. When people were asking me about the Zoom takeover, I'm just like, hopefully they just don't touch it at all and just don't improve anything. They don't get involved whatsoever. They just let it die over a course of a couple of years while we wait for a better alternative.
Yeah, that. And the second kind of thing on the whole, the terms and services and all that. So I kind of agree with you in some ways. Like there's a big part of me, and certainly, a few years ago, I didn't read any terms and conditions. I didn't care about them. And if the app did what I needed to do, I was quite happy with it. But I think it's a pretty useful indicator as to how people think and the devs think when those terms and conditions and things like that are written. And I think it's a hard thing to get across to someone, that especially if they're resistant to hearing stuff they don't want to hear, and they like a particular app and they're wedded to it, or they've even, they put, if you're looking at something like Wasabi, they may have mixed all their coins with it, and therefore they don't want to hear anything about it because they just paid some sats for it, and then they don't want to hear that, that maybe those kind of, they don't want to hear kind of the unwelcome truth about it. But I think for me, it's quite indicative of how someone's going to build their product and how it's going to be tailored as it gets built. If someone is like on the product side or on the development side already basically saying you can't do certain things with it, and not actually going right from the get-go that this is an open source tool, it is only dealing with text, they're already kind of trying to comply with something that already exists. It's a pretty good indicator that things are going to go wrong later, and that their approach is going to be flawed anyway. And I don't want to make this obviously about kind of coin joins specific, but I think it's kind of interesting that after what we saw in something like the Wasabi terms and conditions with not being able to use it, I think for kind of maybe illegal gambling might have even been one of those things. I can't actually remember. There are quite a few things. I certainly think for sex work and things like that, I'm pretty sure that wasn't allowed on it as well for pay, So, but again, I can't remember the exact details. But I think then that was interesting in the way that they designed their product later, and that we saw with the founders talking about things like, you KYC on an exchange, and then you get privacy afterwards. So I think that when someone's got that attitude from the get-go, then they design the product in a certain way, and I think that's also a very good kind of smoke signal for kind of knowing that you're probably using something that's going to be built the wrong way.
I'm just pulling up the Wasabi terms and conditions that I'm going to throw up there. I didn't really want to talk about CoinJoin specifically, but I did want to talk about terms of service because I think there, we live in this intensely litigious society, a heavily regulated litigious society. And I know I find myself covering my ass more than realistically I'm going to act on that, you know? And to the point where, you know, I get DMs, I'm open DMs, right? To the freaks that if I haven't responded to your DMs, my DMs are completely overwhelmed and you should message me on Keybase because I prefer the interface and at least it's like kind of encrypted and we should probably be better off there. But like I get like open DMs about privacy focused things, right? And there's certain things like I don't feel comfortable answering because who the fuck knows who's on the other side of that, right? And if they're trying to pigeonhole me and trying to catch me in something that might be illegal when that's not my intention, when my intention is perfectly legal, you know, people who care about privacy, and so privacy tools, like I completely, like if I and to the point where I would not release a commercial privacy tool because I care about my privacy and I care about my potential users, and I just wouldn't fucking put myself in that situation. I don't want to be in that situation where I could get pinched. But I kind of feel for someone who's releasing a privacy product and is just like on their terms and conditions, they're like, you can't use this for illegal things. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily like, obviously they know, you know, that's a blurred line and then they don't know what that means, right?
I mean, it irritates me though, the whole. I've never seen a reason. I mean, okay, I'm in a different jurisdiction, but I mean, I don't put on my terms and conditions on my site that you can't use a phone for illegal purposes. And I think if I did do it and someone did use it for illegal purposes, I think me putting it in the terms and conditions wouldn't help me in the slightest. It wouldn't make any difference. And I think that, you know, I think we owe it to ourselves to just not cuck ourselves from the outset and just, it's a bit like kind of doing tweets with, this isn't investment advice. I mean, stop doing that. You're not achieving anything. You're protecting yourself. If you go out and, you know, shill shitcoins and then go, oh yeah, but not investment advice, that doesn't mean that you're not, you know, you're not giving people potentially bad advice or whatever. Just, you know, just own it. Own some responsibility. I find it, I've got less and less patience for it these days. Yeah, I mean, like, look at, like.
So, do you see that I pulled up Wasabi's terms and conditions?
Yeah.
Can you read it on your end? Sales of narcotics, items that infringe or violate any intellectual property rights, ammunition, firearms, explosives, transactions that show the personal information third parties in violations of applicable law, transactions that support pyramid, Ponzi, or other get-rich-quick schemes, provide credit card, repair, or debt settlement services, explicit sexual content, money laundering, or any support thereof. Like,
yeah.
they can't tell this.
No, so why
Right.
You know, this actually makes things worse, in my opinion. It makes them, a regulator then or law enforcement, say, well, you said that someone shouldn't, so how are you making sure that someone can't do it? You know, if you just release the software as is and say that's what it is. And apart from it, it annoys me to see the money laundering aspect there. I mean, like, money laundering has nothing to do with Bitcoin in any sense of the word. You know, it's a completely different thing entirely. You know, it's a process and there's a specific definition for what money laundering is. It doesn't tie up here at all. So I think it's widespread ignorance, and it's people that are nervous and they think that kind of showing a kind of nodding kind of acknowledgement of powers that be somehow absolve them and mean that they won't get a pressure applied to them of that business. It's just weak.
Right.
Diverter.
Well, I mean, I agree. It's definitely weak. It's weak, but it's, you know, inherently weak. My defense of it is that it's a weak defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the points that Max brings up is it's almost one of those things where you're just kind of hoping that I say just enough to keep them off of me, like you know, maybe if I just tell them that I'm not going to allow this stuff, it'll keep regulators from looking at me so closely. I think that's a mistake. I think that's commonly a common mistake, actually. It's kind of the reason we're in Bitcoin and even talking about this stuff is we're routing around. All this time spent, and look, I get it. You want to write a letter to, FATFA people and what's Marty calling munching butts or whoever. You want to write a letter to these people, tell them that they're infringing on our freedoms and all this stuff. Fine, okay, write your letter. Spend 4 times in that letter. Spend 4 that time learning around that enforcement. That's what's important. We're just going to route around it anyway. So any appearance that, hey, we're one of the good guys too. We don't like child porn either. Well, of course you don't. And if you see it, you got to get it out there. We're not, I guess what you call free speech absolutists. I don't want to see child porn. I don't want to see child porn. Messenger. Sure, take it off. Fine. But don't tell me that I shouldn't be looking at 3D printed guns. Area could be looking at downloading and making 3D printed guns. We get into a real murky area where it's almost like they're trying to be moral, and that's where I run into problems.
Well, I mean, I think you would argue that fuck legality of a particular jurisdiction. I mean, the operator shouldn't know what's being discussed in the first place. So,
sure, but as you said, in any large groups,
right.
Public open groups, what are you going to do? Of course, there's feds in there. You think there's 20,000 some people in the Keybase deterrence dispense 3D printed group.
Half
How many of those
fed.
you think are fake? Honestly, come on. Look, we did the Bear Arms and Bitcoin conference last year.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, love to. Last year, we're trying to make it an annual thing. Ragnar put it on last year, the Guns and Bitcoin crew. It's in Austin, Texas. Originally, it was going to be Portland. A lot of things happened. Switched to Austin last year, last minute. I was invited to come down and talk on using Bitcoin. Now, when I say guns and Bitcoin in this crew here, what you've got to understand is that these are people that are not at all interested in the, number go up tech, inflation resistance, or what. They don't care. These are people that are, these are people that are using Bitcoin because they have to. They don't care that it's cool tech. They don't care that it prevents wealth. They have.
He's being censored.
Yeah. In addition to that, they also need privacy. They have
you cut out. You cut out for a little bit, so I was just doing the pump move and said you were being censored.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me go back a little bit. But these are guys that are using it to avoid censorship. It's not because they think the tech is cool or anything.
Wait, so this is one of the reasons why I consider you a close friend. Okay. So let's unpack this for a second. First of all, Guns and Bitcoin, I have the link not in the show notes. I have the link on the fucking display if you're watching this live. It's gunsandbitcoin.com. And you can see the event there. It's going to be in Austin in April. Hopefully I will be able to make it. I'm trying to, but it's a weird year. But anyway, what Diverter mentioned was censorship resistance versus number go up. And one of the reasons why I like Diverter and why I consider him a close friend is because I think we both agree that you can't remove the other from you're going to have both. And we have compliance bros that don't want the censorship resistance and they're going to have to fucking deal with it. And we have censorship resistant bros who think, number should go sideways and Bitcoin's designed to pump forever and they're just going to have to fucking deal with it.
Yeah.
So Diverter, I mean, you agree with me here, do you not?
I do. And yes, there's something to be said, of course, that number go up is what attracts the most eyes. I mean, you've got what, rappers, Soulja Boy and people on Twitter right now talking about buying Bitcoin on Robinhood, So of course, number go up puts the eye on. And yes, of course, you're going to have some of those people that come in. They come in for number go up. They stay for number go up until it goes down. And then they're gone, and Bitcoin's a Ponzi, and the rest is history. Some of those people will likely stay around. They'll fall down the rabbit hole. They'll start learning about censorship resistance. I think so much of it is in how Bitcoin is initially presented to people, how they perceive it from that point on. But I would agree 100% with you that you don't get no. And as much as I sometimes may hate to admit it, I think a lot of the censorship resistance goes away if you don't get number go up.
Yo, Max, do you disagree with us? You want to fight with us on this point?
So I always think I'm a bit misunderstood with my attitude on the go up. I mean, like, I'm actually quite bullish on Bitcoin, and I always have been. But I'm just bullish on it because I think that, we're still early. There's still plenty of people that could use this and still don't know how to, or are not aware enough of it. So I think that there's plenty of reason to be optimistic on price. I find price fundamentally boring, though. I don't want to talk about it with anyone, and I don't find anyone that on Twitter that has anything useful to say about it at all. I think pretty much everyone's a charlatan when they try and predict price, whether it's a stock to flow thing or whether it's a candle. I think it's all nonsense. And I'm super interested. Yeah, but that
when you have an asset that's designed to pump forever, of course it gets boring after it keeps pumping forever.
I think though that so I think people get bothered about potentially transaction cost. I mean, we're kind of, there's a whole number of other kind of subjects that are coming in here. But I mean, to put it this way is that I don't think Bitcoin needs to be a reserve asset of companies or banks. I don't think it needs to have the number of the US dollar value increase for it to retain its properties. And I think that it's quite fine for it to exist amongst a portion of the population, and for a portion of the population at a certain portion of time. Not everyone will need Bitcoin's properties on a daily basis. Some people need it for a few years in their life. Some will use it as a small part of their life, all their life. Others will use it all the time in all their life. It's it very much, you take it as you need it. And I think it'll always be there for that purpose. And I think, anyone that wants that mass adoption, falls into that fallacy of thinking that a tool or something like that needs to be used all the time there. And I don't think, it not getting mass adoption affects the price either. So I'm quite, my general feeling is to not pay attention too much to price, and just as a life perspective, you should ideally be living within your means. So, if you're saving more than you're spending, then, whether the price increases or decreases, your stack should be going up higher. It's just personal responsibility.
Shout out to SM, the freak, who wanted to let you know that you're talking about not caring about price while I have the price up on the live stream. I just wanted to say to the freaks that are watching, look at this fucking BISC spread. BISC popped up, the real price popped up while we were recording. I think it's pretty cool. You can see, I don't know if you noticed, but on the left side is the actual orders coming in, and red is down and green is up. So that's pretty cool. But
even what I would say though, when I say I don't care about price, that's not to say I'm not going to kind of buy in, if I see what I think is an over the top drop there, and I'm not going to, literally my day job is involved working on order books. So, I find this kind of stuff interesting from that perspective, and this construction, and, I think it's more to the point is I'm not interested in the predictions. I'm not interested in the people that get excited, or the people that think it's their one last, their one big shot again about getting rich. For me, that reeks of desperation, and it's a bit pathetic. And for what it should be is you've got a tool. If it goes up, then that's great. But ultimately, it makes sense to be saving in this money because it's hard to censor. What portion of your wealth you put in that obviously is up to you, but that's kind of, I'm quite black and white on it in that perspective.
Well, Max, I mean, there's something you said here that like that people need, need corporate treasuries or need the compliance bro stuff. And there's definitely Bitcoiners that are like actively searching for it, right? And they're petitioning corporations to store their treasury in Bitcoin. From my perspective, it has nothing to do with me needing that. It has everything to do with them discovering Bitcoin, just like I discovered Bitcoin, and they're going to buy Bitcoin. Like they're going to buy Bitcoin, and the beauty of Bitcoin is I can't stop them from buying Bitcoin. I cannot sell them my Bitcoin, and I have no intention of selling them my Bitcoin. They will never get my Bitcoin. But if they want to buy it, like I don't blame them, because who wouldn't want to buy this shit? Who wouldn't want to move over to a Bitcoin standard, right? So I don't look at it from, we don't need them, but they're coming. They will come, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, the only thing I'd caution with that, and look, I 100% agree with you, and that's the beauty of the money, money for enemies, anyone can use it, is that I think that the innate properties of Bitcoin make it more suitable for the individual. And again, that's definitely from a personal opinion that I have, and I completely appreciate that someone managing a treasury may have an entirely different opinion. But I would suggest that those looking at it as a treasury asset could find themselves in a bit of a difficult situation in the future. So I mean, obviously, like someone like a kind of Michael Saylor type would be laughing at me right now for saying that, because on a US dollar basis, I mean, his trades would have gone up hugely, enormously. It's done very well. I think it remains to be seen still what kind of trade that will be for MicroStrategy and how well that will work, because that's a public asset. And what does that look like if NASDAQ or wherever else MicroStrategy is listed release rules on holdings limitations in virtual currencies, that type of thing? What happens if corporations under a Biden administration get additional taxes, and then companies like those are forced to essentially get rid of assets like that? How much is that a number go up tech at that point for those companies when it's held publicly and in the face of regulators and politicians who actually see it as an outright rejection of their money and are insulted by that? I think those are all there to play. Whereas I think just the innate properties of Bitcoin mean that you holding that privately as a form of digital cash means it would probably suit your use case better overall. But this is super early days.
Yeah.
You got something to add there, Diverter?
I mean, like Max is right on the he's right on the nose here. There's no question about it. You're also 100% correct in saying that this is the whole beauty of it, is the permissionlessness. If you want to buy Bitcoin, you can buy Bitcoin. I can't stop you. I don't want to stop you. But we do have to kind of stay on our toes about the people that come in with these large swaths of Bitcoin, like the MicroStrategies, and then begin trying to steer this narrative towards their direction, the privacy and the censorship resistance, because I think a lot of them view that as a hurdle to number go up. I think they're afraid that if there is too much privacy or too much censorship resistance, that the government will be more compelled to come in and try to shut this thing down and hinder the increase in US dollar value. So it's, what are you going to do? You're not going to stop them. Each is, speak our minds about what's important, teach people about the things that are important, but at the same time, it's going to be what it is.
And I agree with both of you guys. I think to like clean the dirty a little bit, all the freaks who are listening, you should consider using Bisq. Bisq is a peer-to-peer marketplace where you connect directly with other Bitcoiners to buy and sell Bitcoin. Here's a quick little video of what Bisq is.
There are many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. Bisq is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.
Love that.
So, I mean, I don't think, I don't know if this has to be said, but, you know, we're very deep in here. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Citadel Dispatch does not have any sponsors. Bisq is a personal love of mine. I think it's a very important project. I think it's important that we discuss, you know, why Bisq is important. And someone mentioned in the comments issues if you're using Zelle or using a bank as your payment processor for Bisq. So let's dive into this a little bit. Who wants to start?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take off here. I've been a Bisq user for a little while. The comment I saw earlier, I believe, when you're referring to talking about a possible honeypot if, you know, law enforcement is your counterparty. And you know, sure, yes. Which is, you know, basically the same risk you run on any anonymous or anonymized network. Yeah, the other person you're talking to could be logging everything you say and logging all of your data. So the best that you can do is limit that as much as possible and determine based on your threat model whether or not you should use a different source. When you're talking about Bisq, it's totally different than using one of these other centralized exchanges like a Kraken, for example. There is no, I press a button, I make a trade, I've got the other, you know, when you're dealing in cash. You may have to wait days on a money order. Or, you know, you may have to wait hours on even one of the quick transactions, you know, one of the Zelle transactions. So all this stuff is, as it always comes down to, convenience trade-offs. The actual exchange itself of Bisq is not going to log your personal identifiable information. That's a huge win. All right. Does that mean, is it perfect? Of course it's not perfect. But this is one of those things where, especially in privacy, you cannot let, you know, perfect be the enemy of the good. Just because it's not 100% anonymous and perfect, and you can't be sure that the person you're trading with is not law enforcement, that doesn't mean it's not a huge step forward over handing over all of your data, be able to buy a little Bitcoin, to taking a chance on your counterparty, your direct counterparty, having some of that information, and then you actually storing everything locally on your computer. So I'm a huge proponent of Bisq. It still has kinks, it still has problems, it's going to need work. But when the time comes that everyone gets pushed, because that's what's going to have to happen, as is always, just like with WhatsApp here, when we get pushed and we get that big censorship overreach, people are going to start to realize how important projects like that really are. So I really hope that people start playing around with it now, as opposed to trying to run catch up.
Yo, Max, you got a strong opinion here?
Kind of, yeah. Well, yes and no. So I don't know. I'm gonna risk getting chucked off your show here, but I actually don't like Bisq.
Kick them off
as a tool, yeah. But yeah, I also think it's hugely important, and absolutely, it's like probably one of the most important projects going in the Bitcoin space at the moment. I just don't personally like it myself, and although it's my own fault, but it's also partly due to where I'm based at the moment. So my kind of issues, like I've actually had Bisq on my laptop for years, like back, I remember when it was BitSquare or something like that, and I can honestly tell you every time I booted it up to buy Bitcoin.
BitSquare was a better name.
Yeah, I think so as well, yeah. Better logo as well, I seem to remember. But like every time I boot it up, I then can't be bothered to use it because I hate the architecture, the SPV. I hate how it, I mean, maybe I'm being too cheap and my laptop's rubbish, but like it takes ages to sync, so I don't use it often. stuff. I find it awkward to use, and so I just don't bother. That being said, like, that's not to say I don't think it's a good tool. It's just not really what I like. Personally speaking, and I think this should be a consideration for anyone that's in a similar position to me, so i.e. living in like a big city where you're well connected, is actually try and do trades more in person. And they're not as hard as that you need as they sound. I've got guys I know through our local Bitcoin meetup that do OTC. There's actually not the one. I'm not actually part of it. I'm not comfortable having my personal details on it. But there's actually a large Telegram group for OTC in Singapore, and people just do massive trades on that. And it's moderated. It's carefully done. And when you're living in a city specifically like this, which is pretty safe from a physical perspective, you don't have to worry about getting mugged or anything like that. People do just cash trades of like 100 grand, 200 grand, like, literally meeting up in the street and doing that with Bitcoin. And it's pretty common here to do that. And there's far more liquidity on there than something like BISC. And that's even with kind of popular pairs. Even if you were to get out of an SGB pair and use like Euro and GBP, I think you get a better spread going for an OTC trader here. And again, like, that stuff scales pretty well. Like, if you want to do small trades and you're not willing to do like a trade like 20 grand, then use someone that's also connected to an OTC trader and do that. So I actually, we're pretty good with options in Singapore on a kind of, face-to-face basis. And I think culturally, whilst it's pretty advanced as a country in terms of a lot of like fintech type apps and digital payments, there's certain aspects of it. There's certain industries here that are heavily cash based, and people are used to using cash in certain for certain types of payments, and therefore it's still kind of a big part of culture here, and people are comfortable with that. So for that reason, there's never really been a reason for me to be kind of forced into using BISC.
There's a BISC trader that hates you out there. He just sent BISC Moonbound. It's showing a 45K ticker right now.
But also, that's also kind of
he's giving you the incentive to use BISC, bro.
Well, as a seller, yeah. But I mean, like, this is the other thing as well. I mean, we can actually see here already, like, actually how difficult something like BISC is to use when you've got a mid price like that being so skewed. Like in Singapore, it's actually not unusual for people to be buying tethers directly. So they'll do SGD to USD tether, and then they can take that to some exchange, and then get the price they want to later, and that can be done with absolutely minimal KYC. So so you kind of like, on paper it's very easy, and you see it on Twitter, people will say, oh, you've got to use BISC or use hodl hodl, but actually, like, when you actually get on the street and see how things are done, like especially in Asia, like again, this is very geographically dependent, but it can kind of.
It's not geographically dependent. Well, first of all, I want to do a shout out to SM again. He gets a second shout out for this episode. Freaks, learn from him, and you will get a shout out. I like this idea that people watching Citadel Dispatch are buying on BISC, and they just are getting bullish and they're buying. And I kind of like this concept. Like, I hope that for future Citadel Dispatches, this is only episode 5. For future episodes, like, it'd be funny if every Tuesday BISC pumped, because people who are just market buying on BISC and they're watching Citadel Dispatch at the same time.
But now they're not listening to us; they're focusing on the price. All the numbers.
Okay, Max, we're just having some fun. Okay, we're just having some fun. I agree with you. I'm Zen. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. One sat is one sat. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, it is the ultimate adoption stat, and I don't think anyone can deny we're trying to build a free market here. And a free market is going to price a lot of things and a lot of things, and one day this will turn to sats per dollar because everything will be priced in sats. But until then, it's priced in dollars because that is the global standard. To people saying to Max that this idea that a black market type of or a gray market type of cash deals cannot happen, you're all full of shit. If you've gone out and bought weed, you participated in the same exact type of environment, and I expect this to happen with Bitcoin as well. I don't expect you to go out and buy $200,000 worth of weed, though, which is kind of what Max insinuated. I want people to realize that we had a Hong Kong trader recently who got fucked because she was trying to buy $400,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, people were like, "That's ridiculous. Why would you try and buy $500,000 worth of Bitcoin?"
All
That's
the time.
that's
Yeah.
10 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Like, she was just trying to buy 10 Bitcoin. She got into trouble. So you try and keep your amounts lower than that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things with BISC. It's one of those, love-hate things. As Max, points out, on paper, of course, everyone, yes, use BISC. Then when you go to actually using it, maybe the area that you live in, you might not find an offer ever. You may hit, we may hit a dip in the price, and the liquidity just is gone. It dries all the way up, and the only offer that is on there is for a 40% markup. So these are the things that don't get talked about too much. Everybody, we'd like to paint a nice rosy picture of this, censorship resistant. There's no KYC, all that good stuff. Yes, it's great, but there's some obvious trade-offs. There's some obvious downsides. For me, living in the U.S. especially, and dealing in some of the communities that I like to run in, this trade-off is an acceptable one for me, because what's unacceptable for me is to have identity to be able to obtain some Bitcoin, especially when we run into situations like COVID, where we can't necessarily go out and mingle and meet other people and establish connections and things of that nature. It's very important for us to have some sort of online avenue for people to be able to attain Bitcoin without doing KYC. Now, I myself also like to do some mining. I mine personally. That's not an option for everyone. So it's one of those things where, yes, I'm going to say, use BISC. Use BISC. Everybody use BISC. Everybody's not going to use BISC. Everybody probably can't use BISC. But the idea of BISC is what's the most important to me.
You're telling people to eat the fish again. We're back at the eat the fish. Eat the fucking fish.
Just mine.
I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this because this is something that Bitcoiners do not talk about enough. When I first got into Bitcoin, people said to me, "Don't mine, not worth it. You're not a professional miner." I told them to go fuck themselves. I like learning from my mistakes, so I attempted to mine. The first attempt was cloud mining. Do not cloud mine. That is a horrible idea. You will lose your money. I promise you, if they could mine and make a profit, they would do it. They sold you that risk instead, and they will scam you out of your money. But then I decided to buy a couple ASICs and mine for myself. That is really where Bitcoin is a game changer, tangibly. Let's talk about this for a second. This idea that you can connect to power and internet, and you can receive money through the internet with zero KYC. I think people don't realize and respect this enough. I think what we will see in the next 5-10 years is, as ASIC life cycles level out, and you buy an ASIC and it just becomes, it stays profitable for years. It doesn't get outdated. We will see it distribute because people will be willing to mine for a loss. Would you agree, Diverter? And show us your guides. Just fucking hit us with, well, why should we mine to achieve no KYC Bitcoin? Hit us with it.
First of all, just mine, man. I mean, it's so simple. I don't understand why we have to explain it. Look, first of all, once you said cloud mining, yes, don't do it. Great advice.
Everyone does it. Everyone needs to do it. They just need to do it to burn themselves and get it over with.
Maybe you may be right. But you're 100% right that there's this narrative, and it's so funny to me because in all the other areas of Bitcoin, the main thing pushed is don't trust, verify. You can do all this yourself. You can host your own wallet, unhosted, hosted wallets, whatever. You can do all this stuff yourself. You can run your own node and all that. And then when we get to no, leave that to the big guys. All right, it's not profitable. Don't even try it. And so many people are turned off on it. That's not necessarily the case. It's a very personalized thing. You may be in a situation where mining does make sense for you. Like you said, so at a loss, at a, a loss they can handle. Let me put it like that. You're not going to mine at a, losing 100%. I wouldn't expect you to. But the newer generation miners that are coming out right now, they really change nines anymore. This is one of the things that the 3D gun community runs into as well. Everybody still feels like we're in 2013 3D gun tech, and we're not. They don't. An S9 doesn't get you 13.5 terahash at 1400 watts use anymore. We're beyond that. So that's why I wrote Mining for the Street. The link has been shared a few times. It's still on my Keybase public folder at whatever the word of BTC / Mining for the Streets, whatever that is on my public folder. It's escaping me right now. But the point of that
was
was,
look for it.
I'm sorry, keybase.pub. Is that it? Keybase.pub / diverter BTC.
Keybase.pub / diverter. What's your name? Diverter what?
BTC.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I found it.
Okay. So I wrote that through. The point of that is just getting across that this may be something that you should look into. And I know a couple of people have actually done it. There is a thriving aftermarket for ASICs, especially on Telegram, the one we talked about earlier. Telegram has some terrific groups for verified ASIC resellers, where they basically do KYC on themselves so that they are listed as a verified seller to try to keep you from getting scammed. So they help you out that way. That way you're not handing over all of your information to a Bitmain or a Chinese company who wants to do that. So you can get an ASIC without going through, handing over too much of your identity. And when you plug these things to your house, the first thing you're going to want to do is get rid of any girlfriend or wife or child that you may have. That's going to be the first thing to go, because these things are loud and they're hot. All right, but they're both
so loud.
They're so loud and they're so hot. But
and they're like annoyingly loud. It's like that annoying fucking.
It's so bad. It's so bad, but it's manageable. Want to do that? There's some screenshots I put on there. I've been running the S17 model, the S17 Pro model, 50 terahash. I run them in Coleman coolers. All right, I took a day. I took a drill. I made some terrible looking coolers for sound, to keep my sound from being so bad. I threw them in these Coleman coolers, cut a couple holes in the side, threw some ducting in there where I can get some cool air in and some hot air out, and suddenly it's not so bad. So it's a little bit of work to get this done if you don't have special areas. But if you're in the U.S., your average rate for electricity is somewhere around 12 to 13 cents on the kilowatt hour.
And mine's higher.
Yeah, depending on your state. So, some states are quite safe. You may have, 8 cents, 9 cents, which is definitely manageable. When you're looking at one of these newer generation miners, it's early in their life cycle. They're just now coming out. So you're hopefully, we don't know yet on what we're looking at with older models, probably going to be able to get 4 to 5 years worth of running.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this for a second, right? Like, I'd be willing to fucking I would eat a fucking 25% premium for KYC free Bitcoin.
Sure. And, people do it all the time on BISC or ATMs or whatever. But, the problem you run into with mining at a total loss is your return on your initial investment. Now, whenever you're going to go buy one of these newer generation miners, you're going to put out a couple $1,000. So now, if you're okay with never getting that back, then sure, you can mine at a perpetual loss. But if you are, in a situation where you do kind of want to look to get that money back, there's still options open to you outside of, even if you can't run it in your house. One of the guys that we deal with a lot in the Samurai groups, he's got some miners that are at a hosting facility just a little ways down from me, and he's doing great there. Now, not your A6 miner, I guess. I mean, they're in somebody else's warehouse, so yes, he has to trust.
It sounds kind of shitcoinery to me.
Yeah, that they won't unplug it and run off. The point that I'm getting at is this stuff tends to get immediately discounted as not profitable, whereas, as you said, if you're able to have an electricity rate somewhere in the area and you don't have to pay, S9s or S17, or you can run them at 10, 15, 20% loss for all of your information to these centralized exchanges. And you've got, come to your wallet every couple weeks, you'll get a little download of Bitcoin.
And it's the ultimate stacking sats, right? Because it's built in dollar cost averaging. Basically, you're buying the device ahead of time. You're putting the capital up front, but you're getting the Bitcoin on an average basis.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're doing. And we all know DCA stacking sats. This is all the rage right now.
Stack sats.
This is the highest level of that. This is the highest level. Until BISC comes out with some sort of API or something where you can just do auto trades, and still that's not going to work out great, by the way. But with a miner, you really can set it up. It doesn't take any technical ability. I promise you, it takes none. You put it on your same IP address that wherever you live, whatever network, to the URL, and go there, click a button, copy paste, and it's running. I mean, it takes no technical skill.
It's way easier than people think it is. We're just plugging things in and putting the Ethernet cable in. That's it.
That's all you got to do. You plug the power in, plug the Ethernet in, copy paste, the pool that you're going to mine on, and you're mining.
What about mining shitcoins and auto dumping for Bitcoin? Have you done that through GPU mining at all, or no? Just ASICs only?
Personally, I haven't. No. I know plenty of people that have. Now, I've mined a little bit of Monero, but never actually trying to, just for shits and giggles. But
yeah, I tried it just to see what they were full of shit about, and they were full of shit. Correct. I'm glad I made my 5 cents worth of Monero.
Yeah, exactly what you do. Basically for Bitcoin, and you're like, damn, I'm getting 0.0000. I'm getting like 1,000 sats every so. But that's one of those things where you let it run. You come back a week later. You in your life and doing whatever you're doing, really buying Bitcoin the whole time, essentially. Just a little piece at a time. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't get discounted, because so many people that are instantly told the first time they bring up mining, you can't do it. It's not profitable. It's not even worth talking about or looking at. Check that write-up out. There's a couple other guys that have done it since then. That I know Econo Alchemist. He's going to do another write-up on it, which he does epic Twitter threads. If you've ever read any of his other threads, so don't discount it. Leave all your options open. Use the tools.
Thank you. Appreciate that insight. I just want to do a quick shout out to silent.link, Freak Run Business. Fantastic. You get an eSIM, and that eSIM is your phone number, and it's a British phone number, so deal with it. That's what it's going to be. Unfortunately, graphene and Copperhead do not allow eSIMs, but Calyx OS does allow eSIMs, and it's like a pretty easy way to get a burner phone number with Bitcoin without tying it to your identity. So consider it. Our boy Catan, friend of the podcast, used it and literally could not shut up about it. So go check that out. I appreciate you, Diverter. Thank you for giving us that insight there on mining. I think people just don't appreciate the mining aspect. I think it's like I said, I would 100% mine. I'd mine for like 50 to 40% loss. Like I would just take the fucking huge hit just to have no KYC Bitcoin, and then at the same time, like you're supporting Bitcoin. And even if you're mining shitcoins and auto dumping to Bitcoin, you're supporting Bitcoin because you're auto dumping shitcoins for Bitcoin. So you're increasing the price of Bitcoin and you're decreasing the price of shitcoin. It's like the best attack ever. So regardless of how you decide to mine, whether that's publicly available GPUs or that's ASICs, fucking think about doing it. Just try it. Just do it on a small scale. Enjoy it. I should have done it more. I did it, but I didn't do it hard enough. And just fucking think about doing it. Max, you've been pretty quiet over there. I want to talk about a little bit before we get going here about this idea of you going from Britain to Singapore. To the Bitcoiners out there who are thinking about changing jurisdiction because Bitcoin is pumping and they feel baller as fuck and they just don't like their jurisdiction, what do you have to say to them?
It's easier when you're younger. I mean, I'm 37 now, so I mean, I first came out, I think, kind of 25 or something. So the reality is for most people, you can talk about changing jurisdictions, but it's just not an option for a lot. You know, you have to deal with family being stuck behind, and you know, obviously it's more difficult now to make these moves with the COVID situation. And also it's more difficult to be abroad with the COVID situation because you've now got family maybe back home that you can't visit at certain times. So I think that makes it kind of harder. What I would say, I mean, just as a general thing is I think the great thing about moving abroad and changing jurisdictions, if you are fortunate enough to be able to do it, is I think it gives you a better perspective on things back home. It's very easy to be arrogant and proud of your political systems, your culture and all that. And then to look at it back in a different light, I think is pretty important. Certainly when I came to Singapore, 12 years ago or whatever, I couldn't understand how somewhere that had no real semblance of democracy in the meaningful sense of the word, because it's effectively a one-party government here, and it has been for the same party for years, how it could be so kind of economically free and free in other ways. Obviously, there are some quite substantial freedom restrictions here as well. But by not having what we in, say, the UK or the US would view as a kind of free system. And then for me, it kind of comes into trade-offs, but when you actually start realizing it, you see that the political system is only one part of it. The economic liberalism is a huge aspect. I have no capital gains taxes out here. The income tax is a lot lower. The ability to travel until recently, unlike the rest of the world, like the rest of the world, was also substantially freer. I think it's a great thing to do. I think it's worth doing. I just think that ultimately, there is a cost to moving. If you're setting up a business, it's obviously harder. If you're going with a job that's taking you over, that's substantially easier, and you kind of get the softened kind of impact to the kind of the adjustment. But you do have to kind of put up with a new culture and learn how to adapt somewhat. And certainly, I'll tell you now, I'm not the best at adapting. Everywhere I walk is like a little patch of England, and I'm not the most kind of culturally aware. But somewhere like Singapore, for example, I can't think of many better places to be at the moment. We haven't got kind of the political problems like in Hong Kong. There's nothing like that here. It's very easy to start a business. It's it's a good place to work and live. And by and large, it's a pretty free society with a lot there. But it does depend on kind of what's important to you. If you're into recreational pharmaceuticals or guns, you're not going to have such a good time. If you like to be able to drink outside and not be like in the US, forced to drink your alcohol in a brown paper bag, and local militia, then it's awesome. Like, it's substantially better than the US in that perspective. But yeah, so I think it's always worth considering these things, and if you do get the opportunity, it's worth taking. But it's a big move to make.
I appreciate it, Max. I look forward to visiting you in Singapore when all this bullshit.
Yeah, it'd be great. It's a good group here, and it's a good, I tell you now, like the Singapore Bitcoin meetup group is like very varied. I mean, it's not just full of expats or anything. In fact, it's probably mostly locals. We've got people that work.
What about the chewing gum thing? Has that hit you hard? Were you a gum chewer before you went to Singapore, and then you were like, I'm not gonna do it. I don't want to risk a felony. Like, how did that end up?
Actually, nothing has really affected me. I didn't chew gum, and I this is the funny thing. I never did drugs when I was younger at all, or even now. So this is the other thing that makes me a bit different to some of the Bitcoiners who kind of got familiar with it through darknet markets. I just never had any interest. I mean, all I want to do was drink, and when I came here, I could drink, and there was no problems with that. So it was same as London, really. It's dead easy. So I took to it pretty easily. So no, I think the only thing really that you would potentially notice here is the press freedom is massively limited. But then, I don't read the local newspaper. I don't pay any attention to anything, much to my girlfriend's concern, because she gets worried I'm going to break the local kind of COVID regulations by walking around without a mask and all that. Yeah, I mean, I just, this is the thing as well, right? Is we the country rates terribly on the freedom of press index, I believe. But when you've got the internet, does that really matter? It doesn't make any difference to your day-to-day stuff. And I think the other thing is, is even the government is quite overboard in with freedoms. At the same time, they actually don't step into much.
Wait, that's interesting. That's interesting. Just so your freedom of the press is kind of shitty over there, but they're not going after internet, so you can view every press.
So
right?
Yes, you can. Well, we have got restricted sites, but you can. I mean, obviously changing.
What's
DNS,
restricted?
Tons of porn sites are restricted. I'm pretty sure Pirate Bay is, but
What about the VPNs? Do they block the big VPNs?
VPNs, no problem. You can access all of those, so it's pretty. It's not harsh censorship resistance in that respect.
So it's like the terms of service, right? They're just saying in the terms of service, you can't look at porn, but
correct.
But
and
then you just pay Mulvad Bitcoin and you just go and look at porn.
Yeah, and it's it's a although it's it's a heavily ethnically Chinese country. The main political parties got quite kind of Christian origins, I'd say, and there's still kind of quite a heavy Christian aspect to that. Where the kind of most of the Chinese here are kind of Buddhist. So you've actually got kind of slightly more conservative policy amongst the politicians with how things are acted versus the rest of the country. So things are actually incredibly free sexually, for example, here in ways that would open a lot of Americans' eyes. But online it's incredibly conservative, so it's kind of quite different from that perspective. But that being said, it's not to kind of paper it over as some utopia. I mean, there's there's a couple of high-profile cases of someone even holding up a smiley face in front of the government and doing a small form of protest. So there's absolutely no protests. They get cracked down on incredibly quickly, and you don't poke the bear in that respect here, and the actions are kind of very swift. And again, we're in a country that's got a lot of foreign workers. people will toe the line more because the punishments are very easy for them to do. Because if they've obviously can fine or imprison you, but they can just take away work permits and residency passes, so you can just be out on your ass pretty quickly. So that's so that it's not all kind of freedom at all. It's just that I think for a lot of people it's an acceptable trade-off.
I appreciate that insight. As an American, it is very foreign to me. It is not something that I would inherently understand. So I appreciate you kind of showing that light to us. And like I said, I am excited to visit. I think to me, Singapore is really fucking cool, because to me, like, that's the whole idea of Citadel theory, right? Is that this idea that we could have like city states, like we could have these smaller jurisdictions that have unilateral control over how they decide their jurisdiction is run, and then all of a sudden you have competition and we have really cool things happening. And obviously, like, everyone knows Singapore is a massive global port that like makes New York show respect, which is impressive. As a New Yorker, that's impressive, and I embrace that and I respect that. So I mean, we've gone for over 2 hours here. I appreciate all the freaks who have tuned in. I appreciate all the freaks who are going to listen to this through the podcast feeds. I appreciate both you guys. So I mean, let's just wrap this up with I have not given this to other guests, but we're episode 5 and we have no formula, so we're figuring it out as we go. Diverter, last comments to the freaks until I have you back, which will be soon, I promise you, and I appreciate you for coming on. Hit them with your last comments.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast, man. I hope to do it again. I can leave people with, we're looking about secure messengers and what is and what isn't. The best thing I could do is I could tell you what I run. If you've got questions about them, feel free to hit me up about it, and we can talk. I could just hit you with that. And otherwise, if you want to catch me, check out coin.com. Matt linked earlier. The Bear Arms of Bitcoin conference, I believe it's April 10th and 11th in Austin, Texas. So if you can come, hope to see you there. Besides that, so I'm an Android maximalist. I'm currently on a Pixel 4a. It's running Copperhead OS. Secure messaging, I go to Signal and 3-month secure messaging. I built the 3-month APK from the source code, installed it on my phone. Was dead easy, works great. I haven't done that with Signal. Will one day, but those are what I go to when I want to actually have a messenger. The email I use right now for my daily driver email is ctemplar. ctemplar.com, or they have an onion address as well, which I do not remember. But it's a great encrypted email client. I like it. Still being built out. It's not quite so intuitive maybe or easy to use yet as like a Proton or a Tutanota, but it's one to keep your eye on. For my notes, my encrypted notes apps, I use Standard Notes.
Fuck yes.
Love Standard Notes. They just recently had a really good audit, and they changed some of their cryptography, made it a lot stronger.
Assume
looks really good.
Assume it's fucked. Assume it's fucked, but it's good. It's good.
Sure, yeah. Of course,
right?
Love it.
Like, that's my life. Just assume it's fucked, but it's good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sorry.
Social media. My social media app, like I said, as Max mentioned earlier, Telegram is honestly my social media feed. I also spend some time on, not so much Twitter anymore, a little bit on Mastodon, Matrix, blah blah blah. But my main go-to for that is Telegram. I love it. Bitcoin wallet. This is a bit of a surprise. It may shock some people to know this, but my Bitcoin wallet I prefer is actually Samurai wallet. Believe that or
Fuck
not.
you.
It's all I use. I run my dojo. I keep Oracle spinning, and we get it done. You know what it
What a
is.
surprise.
It's shocking, I know. My keyboard I'm using is TeslaCube. I mentioned that earlier. TeslaPG.com. You can find
I
out
like
some
that.
more
I'm gonna
info on
try it.
that. Supposedly there's a version 2 coming out soon. TM soon.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah. But it works. It works. Browsers, I Tor browser. Obviously, I love Tor. I've been using a lot more lately Bromite, which, as we all saw earlier when I was trying to hook up to this chat, sometimes may
Bromite.
cause a little. So it's all trade-offs on what it may be good for you. But I also like an ungoogled Chromium browser. PN, of course, is all bad right now. They gave me a scare the other day when they took Bitcoin off as a payment option and left BCAD.
Wait. That was some bullshit.
Yeah.
That was just fine. They just had a bug or something.
Yeah.
Like people just
I
fucking freaked out for no
that-
reason. Mulvad's good. Everyone used
Everything's
Mulvad.
fine. Everything's fine there. So yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
diverter.
mobile PGP, open keychain. That's it. That's all I got.
Open keychain.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about PGP at all. I'll bring you guys back. Like if you care about PGP, use it. If you care about privacy, use PGP. PGP is the best thing to do. I have a good guide linked at usepgp.com, which is a very easy domain to remember. Some other random dude made the guide. I just linked to it.
Nice.
So go check that out. You should use PGP. Diverter. Before we leave you, January 19th, 2022. What is the price of Bitcoin?
What is it right now?
No. 2022. I like this idea. This was S&M, by the way, who, by the way, is a freak who just keeps performing. I like freaks. Like the whole point of this show is that I want the freaks to be the host. I want you guys to take my responsibility away from me and handle it for me, and I will just spotlight you. S&M has done that. I like this idea that at the end of every show, I should ask the price prediction a year from now. What will the Bitcoin price be? Diverter, hit us. BIS just hit $50,000. Let's fucking go.
I see that. I tell you what, since BISC is sitting on 50, I mean, it's hard not to go high here. Honestly, though, we got a new United States administration coming in with Biden, and I mean, some of the plans they've already got. Money printer is most definitely getting ready to go burr. So, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead. 125, man. 125.
There we go.
Year.
Thank you, my dude. You're a little low, but it was a good guess. Someone asked in the comments, Proton VPN versus Mulvad. I mean, they're both good. Proton's got good reputation. I just like Mulvad better. I think Mulvad's better. I think you pay with Bitcoin. Max Kaiser just jumping in at the end of 2 hours. It's classic Max. Shout out Max Kaiser for joining us. I just think Mulvad is I don't know what it is. It's just a gut thing. It just feels more real. It just feels like they care. And you're just trusting them. At the end of the day, hosted VPN providers, you're trusting them.
Sure. Yeah. Agree.
Max, hit us.
This is just like final thoughts, wasn't it?
Yeah, final thoughts. Hit us with what you want to hit us. We're five weeks into Dispatch. I'll probably have you guys back on in another 6 weeks or something like that.
Look, I mean, first off, look, thanks for having me on and everything. It's really good to chat to good
Thanks
friends.
for joining, bro.
Fantastic. I think just two things I'd kind of leave everyone with is one, just pay it forward. I mean, since the earliest days that I got involved, I cannot kind of thank enough the generosity of people that walked me through things and went through and explained. And I think it's everyone's duty that when you get that from the others that welcome you in, to continue to do that.
Yeah.
So, you really should do that, and it pays dividends. I'm honestly overwhelmed with the info I get from people. There's and in a particularly difficult year such as 2020, which I'm sure has challenged a lot of people in different ways. Having a bunch of people online that I can argue with, that can make me laugh and all that, and also can help me, has been absolutely critical. So that will be as important for this year as it was for last. Secondly, just learn to manage your keys. Whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's encrypting messaging, I see no way around that. And anyone that says, that you don't need to do that, and you're going to be, that there's going to be kind of mass adoption ways to get around that, I don't see it. For the moment, for any time soon, this is what we've got to deal with. So back up, make sure you've got, redundancy and all that, and make sure also your loved ones have got access to it. Don't be so over the top with your paranoia that only you can access that. If you're the only one that can access your coins, then you need to make some life choices about getting some more important people in your life to hand those over to if you go. That's what it's all about. So definitely that. I won't go in kind of a recount of kind of apps I'm using at the moment or anything. I think Diverter's got plenty on there that overlaps with me. But what I would say is something that we probably didn't cover as much in today's podcast, but is also something that would be good for a future one, is probably more kind of plans for self-hosting. It's something I discussed with people like Catan and a lot of the other guys as well. But shout out to Mosats as well, who's done a lot of the work on the Bitcoin enemies front. I think it'll all be important for us this year to look for user friendly ways of doing stuff like sign-up servers for Matrix, hosting your own Mastodon, Pleroma, that kind of thing, and getting ahead. We've always got to be one step ahead. And I think looking at those and looking at the best solutions there is the natural next step for moving the kind of the concentrated kind of community that we have on a few centralized places at the moment to something a bit more distributed. So look out for the companies that are providing the best solutions to do that, pay for those services, I think hit me up as well if you want to know how to do PGP or whatever. I've done that with plenty of people. Always happy to help there. And best place probably to find me is Telegram or on my email at the moment. And you can also find me on Twitter.
Oh, that's fucking awesome. I just want to say that I feel bad because to this day, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time. To this day, if I died right now, my family would just be fucked. They would get no Bitcoin. All that Bitcoin's gone. I'm just so paranoid that my heirs are at risk. So, and this is coming from someone who has a Deadman Switch as a product. Look it out at finalmessage.io if you want to check it out. But I just don't even trust my own service with that. So I just I just live in a life where if I die tomorrow, it's just a contribution to all you Bitcoiners. I mean, they'll get some of it, but they just won't get the majority of it. I just appreciate you guys. I mean, the whole point of this show is to embrace the freaks that join us live. And I love the freaks that don't join us live as well. I'm not saying I don't love you guys. Thank you for coming for the archive. And the whole point is just to have a good time and just have people who are my friends on. And I appreciate you guys for joining us. I think you guys are going to be on in the future as well. I hope if you'll join us again. And I said last week, pump the NIMS, and so here we are. Let's pump the fucking NIMS, and that's what it's all about. We'll have RHR on Thursday at 2 p.m. What, Dever, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, I love you and Max, but I can't let. Did Max give his price prediction?
Oh no! Thank you. Max. This time next year, price prediction.
80K. I'm always bearish.
I just want him on the record. That's all. I just want him on the record.
Yeah, I'm going for 80K next year.
Wait, so what'd you say?
80,000, yeah.
80,000? You fucking bear, you little piece of shit. Okay, so he's gonna get wrecked. What a shitcoiner coming in with that shitty ass prediction. And I look forward to having you back here while we destroy you on that prediction. And I just tell all the other freaks, stay humble, stack sats, and join us on Thursday for Rabbit Hole Recap, probably around 2 p.m. We don't have a set time because it's just me and Marty just gelling. So we love you all, and stay humble, stack sats.
Thanks, man.
Cheers, guys.
Love you, freaks. Stay humble, stack sats.